Hi, welcome everybody. Today I'm with Christy Diane Farr. I'm so excited. This is one of the people I really wanted to have on this event because of how much not only wisdom you're bringing for unrulies, as you call us, but also the personal help you've given me over the last few months in terms of getting my projects in order, in terms of setting things up in a way that works for my brain and the implications of that, and dealing with my ever-present backlog, which is still happening, right? So working with Christy has really significantly impacted my life in a good way. And I wanted to take a moment to thank you, of course, and then have you have a chance to introduce yourself to all of us.
All right. Well, thank you. I have loved working with you. And I am most excited about it because you're like my dream client, in that you have really important work to do in the world. And the weight of that work and the reality of your brain and your body and your health and your position in the world, all of those things become barriers to us doing what we want to do. And so like I talk space healing and I talk productivity, but like what gets me out of bed every day is helping people just go do what they mean to do in the world. And so I've really enjoyed watching it work, these ideas work for you. And I know it's going to take a while for it to all be up and running, but it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I see is your thing is, like you're saying, it's not so important about the project, the space healing, like the name of that, what you're offering. It's how do we integrate these things? And I think this is what every single conversation has been about. It's not just about coming and doing any sort of practice and leaving it. It is very much integrating this in, and the habit, not just the habits, but the awareness that brings, the changes that brings to how we show up is slow. It kind of has a lesson for us, right? So we're talking about the space healing, right? That's something like, this with all this controversy around Marie Kondo, I think one of the things she really brought to the forefront that I appreciate was this animism, that there is a way that our house can support us in our goals, right? And I think the way you taught us in space healing, it was very similar. I mean, a different approach, but the same thing, that this is not just dead things around us or inanimate objects around us, but they can give us life. That is there something we can do? So that's the gentility and the love that I think you're bringing to this work. And if it helps us do our work more powerfully, then I think a lot of people in my audience will resonate. So where shall we start? Talking about a lot of the people who are in my audience are wanting to do good work in the world, and they are weighed down. They are overloaded. They are exhausted, and they might have clutter. They might have a planner that isn't working for them. These might be the physical symptoms, but where do we get started in all of this process?
I think the place to start is to just sort of take a moment to pause and get real with ourselves, and to, recognize what's not working. And there are indicators, right? Like if you're outside of the house, at a meeting, at a library, at a store, at a friend's house, and you walk into your house and you feel worse than you felt when you were out inside, out in the world, that's a sign that there's something going on in your physical space that is like unsupportive. It's not about being pretty. It's not about being, clean. It's not that. It's what happens to my energy, what happens to my brain when I walk into this place that's my home, my supposed to be my, ideal, like, place to function in the world. And if that's not happening, that's a flag for something needs to change in your space. If you are chronically late and running out of time and never getting to the things that are the most important to you, that's a sign there's something going on with time management. If it's not I want to say that none of these things are like morally a problem. Like we can lay all of that down, everything we've learned our whole lives about how we need to be a certain type of person. This is about, is this working for me? So if you're feeling frantic, if you can't find your keys, if you can't get where you need to be with the stuff you're supposed to have with you, that is just means like there's an executive function perhaps seeing going on where it's just not working for you. That's a sign you need help there. Another one that I see a lot is decision making. We have a unprecedented amount of decisions that we have to make. I think this is especially true for anyone who is in charge of a family. I think this is especially true in my experience for those who are married to people who have neurodiversity or have children who are neurodiverse, because sometimes we have this whole little neurodivergent family and one person, often a femme, is like responsible somehow for their neurodivergent brain to be the executive function for the spouse and the kid. And it's not possible to do that the way most of us are living. It's just too many decisions. So getting stuck in a pile of paper is often about like not having the ability to decide what needs to happen with this piece of paper. How do I be done with it? Do I put it on a calendar? Do I need to keep it for taxes? Do I need to? Those decision-making things sometimes are the red flag. So if we're getting all the daily to-do stuff done, but we're not getting the big projects done, the book never gets written, the new program never gets launched, that's a project problem. Maybe we know how to do individual tasks, but we're not, we don't have a good system for how to attack something that has a lot of steps. So those are the signs that you need a specific kind of support.
Yeah.
Then any, like you said before, any system can work if we work it, but then we sometimes have a hard time working the system too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, dovetailing with what you said, we're having an unprecedented level of people that there's a couple trends going on. One is the demand for personalization, which I'm hoping we can talk about a little later in this, that people want personalized planners. People want, that ability to create that for themselves. And I would love to talk about that. But the other one is the number of people who are getting late diagnoses into neurodivergence. And because of the way things have shifted in the DSM and the way we're understanding brains differently, and how many women or people socialized to be women are not getting the diagnosis earlier on. And I think it's the mid 40s that women might be diagnosed with ADHD right. That's the mean age right now, median age. So we might really want to think about, hey, if we're coming into life, and certainly in my case, perimenopause and other things going on made that really tricky. Like it brought up all of and there's evidence to show that too. ADHD symptoms getting worse during menopause and perimenopause because of disruptions in hormones and so on. So, it's not a lot of research done on these things, not a lot of supports out there, and then facing medical racism, medical misogyny, medical, gaslighting that tends to happen. It's a mental health problem. It's depression, right? So these are also things that I think a lot of people are, at least people in my circles, we're talking about these things. Hey, we need something more personalized. And I didn't realize I was neurodivergent, but that fits. How do we then start to make time and space for this? How do we start to look in that, as you're talking about, that gap of where we are and where we want to be? How do we sit in there with these new realizations that might be coming up?
Right. That's a great question. Part of the challenge is that we've been coping the way we've been coping for decades by the time we realize what's going on. A lot of the people in my community are getting their kids diagnosed, because they're seeing stuff with their kids that doesn't feel normal. And then they're reading this and they're like, oh my goodness. Oh, right. This is, I think, an awakening that's happening. And then what we have is how we coped the whole time, which wasn't terribly effective. Now there's this, oh, okay, this makes sense. But then what? For some things like ADHD, we can take meds, but taking meds doesn't go back and fix all of the things we did to cope until we got diagnosed and medicated. And for other situations, medication isn't the solution. We need a whole new way to think about life, and that reckoning. I can't help but wonder if that's what we used to call like a nervous breakdown for women back in the day. We don't use that term anymore, but there was all of this like hysterical women. Like that's where I was, when these things started to change for me. And there's the reckoning, unsupported can be really disastrous. But I think with these ideas, we can have a more smooth transition into understanding how our brain works, understanding what about our life isn't working for our brain, and to kind of gradually, it's like turning a big boat, we just have to start doing these, thinking about what has to be done today versus what's the backlog. How will I keep up with these appointments once I make them? It is decades in the making, and we need to give ourselves a little time and support to transition to a life that is more supportive of our brain.
And it is more
possible.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, even more possible for our brain, right?
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. I kind of was thinking about what Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the trim tab, the kind of rudder movement that we're moving very tiny things, but eventually that's going to have bigger, longer term, as we're making this 180 of our boat, we're making tiny gradual changes that will eventually lead to bigger changes. So it will often feel like it's inner victories. People aren't going to see these kinds of milestones we're making. It is doing a lot of grief work. Hey, this is what I thought I was told I could be, and I'm not able to live up to that. Or let me give myself some credit that I managed, even with these not great coping mechanisms, they saw me at least to here. And can I do something different? It's having hard conversations, right? So it's putting in these systems. So it's like, it needs to be a holistic plan from what you're saying. And I know this is not on our talking notes at all, but I've got to ask, I've got to push the envelope a little bit. But a lot of the people in both of our communities are small business owners or entrepreneurs. And there is a lot of evidence to show small business owners being neurodivergent. And then there's also a pretty big intersection, although the data is kind of sparse, that are gender minorities. Are they often, so queer people, are they often in this, also having a higher than normal instance of neurodiversity? Then, so it's like, how do we factor these things in? Because there's a lot more lenses than we're used to maybe thinking about.
Absolutely. So I think what it means is that saying the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And so when you think about being this like unconventional person in terms of I have ADHD, it's like, oh, well, I'm also queer. And like, what is gender? Because that's a question I've been asking the last 5 years as my children have grown up and been like, oh, they're non-binary. Oh, and I'm just like, well, I'm so like staunchly a woman. Like, why? Like, what, what about my insides makes me a woman, if not my, well, I've often wondered how much of it is like patriarchal coping mechanisms. Like, am I just a woman because I didn't have a way to conceive of myself being powerful and money making? So I was like, oh, I should have some children and get myself some security. I think that what I'm finding out is that this, what I call unruliness, goes through my creativity, my work, my relationships, my parenting, my, all of the things. And it I think greatly impacts my place in like capitalism, because now I've got, I'm a witch, I'm an atheist, I'm all of these other things that like don't really fit with the way our world works. And it's in one hand very liberating to make peace with all of that. But then I think as soon as I did, I could feel the weight of like, oh, this has never been a game I could win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've been racing for 30 years and crumbling, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the work that you're doing, and that many of us have to internally like reevaluate.
Mm-hmm.
The game is not set up for people who are unruly in this way, whatever the, whatever
Yes.
your diagnosis or whatever is, it's not set up to support us. So what do we do? Because it can feel overwhelming. It can feel chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do we start to sit with that? And then, you've given us a couple strategies, like really taking personalized approach, kind of massaging things to fit us. Yeah.
Yes. When I wrote that, outline for us today, I didn't have the idea that I had, but I woke up with this idea. So I brought it with me in case the conversation opened up for this.
Okay.
And I have a job aid, because this is what IO psychologists do. This bottle of pills is supposed to hold 300 capsules, and our lives are like 600 capsules trying to get into that bottle. Yeah. And that moment of recognition of like, no matter how hard I try, I cannot get all of these pills into this bottle. We start to get creative. We think, oh, well, maybe I can, change this packaging myself, right? I could melt it down, make it thinner, bigger, right? If the plastic was less thick, I could make it a bigger container. Great. But like, that's our bodies in this, in this story. And our bodies are strained by us attempting to force, 600 pills into a 300 pill container. So we have to reckon, like, what of these pills can't come into this being I call my life? Like, what practically cannot happen? And that's the reckoning I'm talking about. The other thing I see people try to do, and that I've definitely tried to do, is like, well, what if I crushed these capsules or these tablets and then took all the air out so I could get more into the container? But like, that's the air we breathe, right? That's our spirit inside those pills, right? That's our life's work. That's our children. That's our role in the community as a helper and a healer. So like, anything that we do to try to get more pills into this container is like destroying us. And being able to say, I'm at a phase in my life right now where a lot of my resources go to parenting. So these other projects are going to have to wait. Or my community is in pain because of another, violent incident with police. I have to stop doing this stuff so that we can all go to this protest, or so I can support these people, or so I can, whatever the next thing is, learn what I need to learn for this to be different. I think we just at every moment, and maybe every day even, are deciding like what's happening in that bottle that is our lives. And when we reckon the limitation, all of a sudden those decisions get a lot easier. If I say to you, you have enough bookcases to hold 300 books, and that's all you can have. Well, you're like, well, that's okay. I can get like, well, this, I've already read this. I can give this to a friend, but as long as we're thinking, infinite bookcases, then how will we ever get rid of any books?
Yep.
We're doing this with our very lives, right? We're saying, this is infinite. I am infinite, or these needs are infinite. And we just have to stop saying that. Because like, yes, maybe we can do all the things. We can't do them all at the same time. We can't do them all with the very limited resources that we have. Oh. We gotta choose something that we call north for today and pursue that with what we have inside of us.
Yeah. I love that it's not a fun realization to come to, because it hurts, right? Like, hey, I've already perhaps used some of my life pursuing the wrong things, or, like, is it patriarchy that may, we have these questions, these doubts, but then when we do put it down on paper, or in some format say, okay, I literally can't do everything, or my life expectancy is here and I really need to be thinking about these things, or, like it just puts things into a sharper focus. And by definition, we need to make some decisions because we can't take everything with us. We can't take everyone with us, in some way. So I think that's a gentle way to do that. And when we're trying to, I want to continue this discussion forever. And I'm conscious of time, but, we didn't get to cover everything, but how would you go about starting to make these decisions with honesty, with compassion?
I think it starts with assessment, and whether that's with a person, a coach, me, or someone else, a therapist, a loved one, a girlfriend, some kind of mentor, some kind of peer, and just saying like, this is not working. Let's start with an assessment. What is all the stuff that I'm doing, that I'm committed to? What's filling up my inbox? What are all these papers, right? Look at your schedule and see like where all of the places that things collide, right? And looking at those and getting really honest about what's not possible. And this is the place where I want to say that we get to push back against the systems, right? So if the patriarchy tells us we need to have children to be valid because, we're socialized as women, I want to say like, do you? And if you already have them, yes, you have a responsibility to them. But what if you decide that your work is going to come first in your family? What if you advocate for yourself to be able to write a book in the evenings instead of go to soccer practice? I think that a lot of times the things we think are off the table because of the systems. So if you don't have the financial resources to get a life coach, then like, can you barter? Can you come find somebody who has a cool free offering and implement it like your life depends on it? Can you get a group of people together and say, okay, we're all having the same problem. How are we going to figure it out? Because together we can brainstorm and come up with solutions. I think the system stuff, if we reject that, it starts to become more possible, because if you listen to the systems, they're going to tell you that you don't have a chance to do all of the things you need to do to provide for yourself. And I think then saying, okay, what do I need to release is the word I often use, but finding ways to just say, I thought I could and I can't. Or this is the arrangement that we've had in the past. And in order for me to continue this relationship or this dynamic, I'm going to need the reality of it to change. And that happens in romantic conversations all the time, but it also happens with kids. Like, are the kids old enough to be doing more than they're doing? I need to not be doing laundry. Like, I need to be, doing this other thing. Let's help get everybody on board for our collective purpose instead of me trying to execute everybody else's life for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the most powerful things that one of the first sessions we met. And you said, you're like doing 8 to 10 people's work right now in all you're doing. And no wonder you have a backlog. No wonder things are not working. No wonder the pills aren't fitting in the bottle. Like, you can't keep doing this and expect something different. So a lot of mini shifts have had to happen to say, okay, I maybe can't get rid of all those jobs in one day, but can we start to have these conversations? Can we start to shift things? Can we start to prioritize in a way that works for us?
Well, and I think that one thing we should remember is that as neurodivergent people, we can't think in the box. So letting ourselves loose and saying, how can I creatively solve this, is actually one of the only things we're capable of doing. So, bucking the system. I don't know why you said Franklin Covey earlier. And like the first thing I ever did to try to make sense of my brain, I think I was 15 years old the first time I bought a Franklin Covey planner. And I opened it up and it was like, what are your goals? And I was like, I'm 15. I have no idea. And I didn't get to use it because that was a barrier. Like, the whole thing anchored on figuring out my values and my priorities. And I was like, no one's talking to me about how that works. So
Mm.
I think for us, the barriers that maybe are neurological, we can use those same gifts that are the flip side of that barrier to solve these problems unconventionally. Yeah. I just want to put a plug in for the brain. It can't do it the way we're supposed to do it, but a lot of times if we let go of that, we can find a way around.
Yeah. That actually makes it easier for us to follow through and meet the goals that we do have, right? That's the brilliance of it. If we're trying to attempt to make these goals happen in the neurotypical way, it's not necessarily going to work for us, right? Or if for people of color, right, necessarily couldn't make it work as if we're a white person. Okay, if we took those other roles away and said, okay, how can I succeed on these terms? There might be ways forward, right?
Yes.
So you're offering an awesome gift for everybody, which is awesome. Not everybody, but certain people. And where can people find out about you? I want to keep going, but I'm also cognizant of, I want to wrap this up too.
I understand. I think this is a lifelong conversation, so we get to keep having it. If people are interested in getting support from me personally, you can find me at theunrulywoman.com and on most social media, The Unruly Woman. And I have a discovery session that I have had out in the world for a long, long time, and I'm pulled it back. So I have a free discovery session that I do. It's 30 minutes, and I'm going to say that if any participants here want to have one of those with me, I'm going to extend it to 45 minutes, let you bring a question or two. And instead of just like trying to sell you on coaching, I'd love to just do some problem solving in the moment and get some relief for you right now. So you can just reach out to me through the contact form on my website is the easiest way. Be haunted by theunrulywoman.com and you'll always be able to find me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate your time today.
I am so grateful to be here. Thank you.